The winter morning came slowly to the high valley, painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of pearl and rose. Samuel McKenna stood outside his modest log cabin, his breath forming small clouds in the crisp mountain air. At 14, he had already learned the harsh lessons of frontier life, but his heart remained tender toward those in need. The cabin had been his father's dreamer, simple refuge built from hand-hewn logs in a valley surrounded by towering mountains. After his father's passing the previous spring, Samuel had stayed on alone, tending to the small plot of land and the handful of livestock that sustained him through the long quiet months. He was splitting firewood when he first heard the soft whimpering carried on the wind. Samuel paused, his axe suspended mid-swing, and listened carefully. The sound came again, weaker this time, from somewhere beyond the frost-covered meadow that stretched between his cabin and the dense line of pine trees. Setting down his axe, Samuel pulled his wool coat tighter and walked toward the sound. His boots crunched through the snow, each step deliberate and cautious. The mountains held many dangers, and a boy alone had learned to move with careful purpose. Near the edge of the tree line, he found her. A young native woman lay partially hidden beneath a snow-laden pine bough, her traditional dress torn and muddy. Her long black hair spilled across the white ground like spilled ink. She was shivering violently, her lips blue with cold. One hand pressed against her swollen belly. Samuel's heart lurched. She was with child, and clearly in distress. "Ma'am," he called softly, approaching slowly with his hands visible. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" The woman's dark eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glazed with fever. She tried to speak, but only a whispered word in her native tongue emerged. Samuel didn't understand the language, but he understood need when he saw it. Without hesitation, he knelt beside her and carefully slipped his arms beneath her slight frame. She was lighter than he expected, but the weight of her condition made each step back to the cabin a struggle. The woman drifted in and out of consciousness, murmuring words he couldn't comprehend. Inside the warm cabin, Samuel laid her gently on his father's old bed, the only proper bed in the one-room structure. He built up the fire until the flames crackled high and bright, filling the space with dancing orange light. Then he set water to boil and gathered what clean cloth he could find. The woman's fever burned high. Samuel bathed her face with cool water and spooned warm broth between her lips when she was lucid enough to swallow. Her belly was round and full. The baby would come soon, he realized with a mixture of wonder and fear. He had helped birth calves and foals, but this was different. This was a human life, maybe 2 human lives, depending on him. For 3 days, he tended to her with the devotion of a son caring for his mother. He learned her name was Ayana, which she managed to whisper during a moment of clarity. She was perhaps 18 or 19, with delicate features and work-worn hands that spoke of a hard life. On the 3rd evening, as Samuel stirred a pot of rabbit stew over the fire, Ayana's eyes opened fully for the first time. They were alert now, the fever finally broken. She studied him carefully, this pale boy who had saved her life, her hand resting protectively on her belly. "Thank you," she said in accented but clear English, her voice still weak but determined. Samuel turned from the fire, relieved to hear her speak words he understood. "You don't need to thank me, ma'am. Anyone would have done the same." Ayana's eyes held a sadness that seemed older than her years. "No," she said quietly. "Not everyone would help someone like me." Over the next 2 days, as her strength slowly returned, Ayana told Samuel her story in careful, measured words. She was the wife of Chief Running Bear, leader of a band that had been forced from their traditional lands by the expanding settlements. She had been traveling with a small group when they were attacked by rival warriors. In the confusion and violence, she had become separated from her people and had wandered, lost and injured, for days before collapsing near his cabin. "My husband will be looking for me," she said, one hand stroking her belly where the child moved restlessly. "He is a good man, but the others, they may not understand your kindness." Samuel nodded, understanding the complexity of her words. The tensions between the settlers and the native tribes ran deep, fed by fear, misunderstanding, and the steady pressure of a changing world. But here, in his simple cabin, those larger conflicts seemed distant and unimportant compared to the immediate needs of another human being. "When the baby comes, we'll figure out what to do," Samuel said simply. "Until then, you're safe here." The baby decided to arrive during the darkest hour before dawn on the 6th day. Samuel had dozed fitfully in his chair by the fire when Ayana's sharp gasp awakened him. Her labor was swift but difficult, and Samuel found himself praying to whatever force governed the mountain wilderness as he helped bring the child into the world. The baby was small, but strong, with a lusty cry that filled the cabin with the sound of new life. A daughter, perfect and beautiful, with her mother's dark hair and her father's strong features, which Ayanna could see even in the newborn's tiny face. As Samuel cleaned the child with trembling hands, Ayanna wept with relief and joy. She whispered, naming her daughter, "It means dawn." Indeed, the first pale light of sunrise was beginning to filter through the cabin's single window. Painting the room in soft gold, Samuel wrapped little Zora in his cleanest shirt and placed her in her mother's arms, feeling a profound sense of completion, as if this moment had been meant to happen. But the peace of that perfect dawn was shattered by a sound that made Samuel's blood run cold. Hooves, hundreds of them, thundering across the frozen valley floor. Samuel rushed to the window and peered out through the frost-glazed glass. The entire valley floor was alive with movement-mounted warriors spread in a wide line, their horses' breath steaming in the cold air. At their head rode a tall figure in a magnificent feathered headdress, his bearing unmistakably that of a leader. "Chief Running Bear," Ayanna whispered from the bed, her voice filled with both joy and apprehension. "He has found me." Samuel felt his heart hammering against his ribs. The sight was both magnificent and terrifying. Dozens of warriors, on horseback, silhouetted against the snow-covered mountains like figures from another world. They had stopped just beyond the cabin's modest fence, their horses pawing the ground and snorting clouds of vapor into the morning air. "What do I do?" Samuel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ayanna struggled to sit up, clutching baby Zora to her chest. "You walk out there," she said with quiet dignity, "and you show them that you are not afraid. You show them who you are." Taking a deep breath that seemed to fill his entire chest, Samuel straightened his shoulders and opened the cabin door. The cold mountain air hit him like a physical blow, but he walked forward with steady steps, his hands at his sides, empty and visible. Chief Running Bear nudged his horse forward, separating himself from the line of warriors. He was an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with graying hair and eyes that held the weight of countless difficult decisions. His gaze fixed on Samuel with an intensity that seemed to see straight through to the boy's soul. For a long moment, they studied each other across the snowy ground, the young white settler and the native chief, representatives of two worlds that had been at odds for generations. Then Chief Running Bear spoke, his voice carrying clearly in the crisp air. "You are the one who has sheltered my wife." Samuel nodded, finding his voice. "Yes, sir, she was hurt and with child. I couldn't leave her to die in the cold." The chief's expression remained unreadable. Behind him, the mounted warriors sat motionless, waiting for some signal from their leader. Samuel could feel their eyes upon him, measuring, judging. "She carries my child?" Running Bear asked. "A daughter," Samuel replied, "born just now with the sunrise. They are both well." Something shifted in the chief's stern features, a softening around his eyes, a slight relaxation of his shoulders. He dismounted with fluid grace and walked toward the cabin, his steps deliberate but no longer threatening. Samuel stood aside as the chief entered his humble dwelling. Inside he heard Ayanna's voice, soft and relieved, speaking rapid words in their native tongue. He heard the deeper rumble of Running Bear's response, filled with emotion and tenderness. When the chief emerged from the cabin minutes later, he carried his newborn daughter in his arms, his weathered face transformed by wonder and joy. Ayanna followed slowly, wrapped in Samuel's father's old blanket, still weak but radiant with happiness. Running Bear looked at Samuel for a long time, his dark eyes thoughtful. Then he handed the baby back to her mother and removed something from around his neck, a leather cord strung with an intricately carved bone pendant. "This belonged to my grandfather," the chief said, placing the cord around Samuel's neck. "He was a man who believed that kindness to strangers brings blessings from the spirits. You have honored his memory today." Samuel felt the weight of the pendant against his chest, understanding that he was receiving far more than a simple gift. This was recognition, respect, perhaps even a form of protection in a world where such gestures could mean the difference between life and death. "Thank you," Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I only did what anyone should do." Chief Running Bear shook his head. "No, young one. Not everyone would have opened their door. Not everyone would have risked their own safety for a stranger. You have shown us that there are still good people in this world, regardless of the color of their skin." As the morning sun climbed higher over the mountains, casting long shadows across the valley floor, Samuel watched the chief's band prepare to depart. Ayanna approached him one final time, baby Zora sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I will tell her about you," she said softly, "about the boy who saved us both when we needed saving most. She will know that kindness exists in the world because you showed it to us." Samuel nodded, unable to find words for the emotions swelling in his chest. He had given shelter to a stranger in need, and in return he had received something precious, the knowledge that compassion could bridge even the deepest divides between people. As the mounted warriors began to move, flowing across the valley like a river of horses and riders, Chief Running Bear raised his hand in a gesture of farewell. The sound of hooves gradually faded, leaving only the whisper of wind through the pine trees and the gentle crackling of the fire inside the cabin. Samuel stood in his doorway long after the last rider had disappeared beyond the ridge, the bone pendant warm against his skin. The valley was quiet again, but it felt different now, blessed somehow, marked by an encounter that had changed everything and nothing all at once. He was still a young man alone in the wilderness, facing the challenges of survival in an unforgiving land, but he was also something more now, a bridge between worlds, a keeper of hope, a testament to the truth that kindness, once given freely, echoes through the mountains like thunder and returns to the giver in ways beyond imagining.